Welcome to the book release reading for Sally Albiso Finalist, Tangled in Vow and Beseech by Jill McCabe Johnson and The Scarecrow of My Former Self by Sarah Stockton. I'm going to show you these two pretty books, very pretty books, beautiful books. And the photograph on Sarah's book is by her husband. I'm Lana Heckman Ayers, the managing editor for MoonPath Press, and I'd like to thank you for showing up for poetry as the beauty of spring is beginning to blossom for so many of us, while tragedies continue to rage all around the world. Poetry can bring us strength and hope, can inspire us to stand up against wrongs, can empower us to become more compassionate beings. And you'll witness all of these elements in the poems from our two poets here today. I want to thank Sarah for inviting American Sign Language interpreter Mylin Gotland of Chicago to join us here. And thank you so much to Mylin for being here. Our first reader is Sarah Stockton. As an adjunct professor, Sarah developed and taught courses on spirituality, poetry, and literature at the University of San Francisco. Her poems have been published or are forthcoming from Poetry Northwest, Whale Road Review, Blue Mountain Review, Rise Up Review, Crab Creek Review, Swim.org, and Echo Theo Review, among many others. She's the author of chapbooks Time's Apprentice from Dancing Girl Press and Castaway from Glass Lyre Press. Sarah's work has been nominated several times for Pushcarts and Best of the Net. She's the founder and editor-in-chief of Rivermouth Review Literary Journal, which publishes new and established poets alike. The Scarecrow of My Former Self is her debut full-length collection. Sarah and her beloved husband live on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State by the Salish Sea. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Lana. I appreciate the introduction. I also was so moved and honored to be a finalist for the Sally Albiso Award, and I am grateful also for this opportunity to read. As much as I am an introvert, I appreciate being given the chance to share my work with everybody. I'm going to read a few poems from The Scarecrow of My Former Self. This collection mainly addresses my experience of chronic illness. It wrestles with the effects of isolation, doubt, grief, anger, and even hope that so often come along with the experience of an illness that forces the person to withdraw. I think this is a situation, of course, that could apply to many other experiences people have, including the pandemic, or the isolation of deep grief or disability. And it was very healing for me to write these poems. So I'm very grateful to be able to share them with you today. I'm going to read poems from the 3 sections of the book. Those sections are Skeptics and Healers, Cast-offs and Connections, and Solitude and Grace. So here's the first poem. Survival Plan. Make a scarecrow of self-worth from bloodied dancing shoes, a mask, and a sea green bathing suit. Call it silly, call it profound, call it regret. Learn to dance in the wind despite all corporeal limitations. So what if the crows ignore you? This is the daily practice. Trade the desire for 100 journeys forbear usefulness, even joy. Lean toward the straw gold sun, bow in the snow and rain. Send out no invitations, decline all requests. Stay vigilant above the invisible field where hope grows. This will be the Scarecrow's task. I've written a lot of poems to the medical world. Some are angry, some are grateful. Most are trying to explain and defend what it means to have a chronic illness that is undefined and has no cure as of today. This is called Not a Delusion. Can we agree, doctor, that even an illness with no discernible etiology is no one's fault? I'm not sick because of my sheer willfulness, and victim blaming by the healthy is an assault. Chronic fatigue and pain are not symptoms of the morally, mentally weak. I'll process past trauma, family grief, socio-political conditions, and by the light of the moon, hydrate and cast spells, set limits, take anxiety meds, walk and move and breathe, become my own lover. But when it comes to blaming myself, I balk. Myself isn't a virus from which I must recover. Joy is my true nature, but this illness cuts to the quick. Self-care is all to the good, yes, but I am still sick. Of course I'm all right, even when pretending otherwise. My body knows the truth of what happened. Moving clumsy, carrying a vase of summer flowers that bloomed infested. Some flowers are an ambiguous allegory for this body's composure, their heads bent too low to respond to the light, keeping company with autumn fires, the broken gate. Bedbound. I suppose I could still move toward God by humming under the blankets, following sun and moonlight through the window, feeling the season's air on my skin. I suppose I could never think of God again, while knowing the loneliness of that leave-taking would still be God. I suppose I could spend my time imagining how elephants move. They don't question whether the earth will continue to hold them up, as each deliberate, rhythmic step signals love to the herd. They are drumming the everlasting, walking without worrying about God. Sorry, that last line always makes me choke up. Okay, on a lighter note, coping strategy, gratitude list. Just grateful not to feel worse. Desires downgraded to a working digestion, steady heart rhythm, legs that don't try to get up and walk of their own volition. Grateful for the infrequent moments when I remember to make a gratitude list. For the shield of cynicism and the vulnerability that sometimes takes its place. Grateful for those times when the burden of another person's pain added to mine heals us both by grace. For the ability to cry, let us give thanks. Take a sip. Keep going. there's some kind of force pressed against my back, nudging me forward, because sometimes I'm a person, other times a lifelike scarecrow mimicking normal conversation, arms and legs askew. This something tells me to reach for the frying pan, reach for the foxglove planted in the ground, listen to the neighbor's complaint, wash the sheets stripped from the bed of lying awake, walk forward, lean back. Here's the last one. Stella Marina. They say when a starfish loses a limb, it grows another, can even shed on purpose. Sacrifice an arm or some spiny skin, protecting the core as a survival measure when its various parts are gobbled by a sea otter, a hungry eagle. A sea star will continue on, regenerate organs, bright orange and red, grow stronger, though forever scarred. I've lost so many extensions of my life that will never grow back. I am untrained in the science of restoration. Perhaps I should seek out a tide pool, dip my star-shaped hand in kelp-infused water, and wait. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that beautiful reading.
Thank you, Lana.
Next up is Jill. Jill McCabe Johnson holds an MFA in creative writing from Pacific Lutheran University and a PhD in English from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Honors include support from the National Endowment for the Humanities, Artists Trust, and Hedgebrook, among others. Jill is the editor-in-chief of Wandering Angus Press. Other publications of Jill's include her books Revolution, We'd Hoped We'd Outgrown from Finishing Line, shortlisted for the Clara Johnson Award for Women's Literature, and Diary of the One Swelling Sea from MoonPath Press, winner of the Nautilus Silver Award in Poetry. Jill McCabe Johnson lives and writes in the San Juan Islands and can often be found wandering beaches and trails, learning what she can from her close observations of nature. Welcome, Jill.
Thank you, Lana.
Oh, wrong Jill. Sorry.
Hi, Jill.
Wrong
Looking
Jill.
great. Hi.
Sorry, Jill.
Let me send you my poems. No worries.
Oh, okay.
Well, while that's sort of being sorted out, oh, hi, here we are. I wanted to thank Lana for not just for hosting this reading and publishing our books, but for all she does for the poetry community and has for a long, long time. It's just so wonderful to be able to have you in the community as a leader and encourager, and also as a fantastic writer. I love your poetry and your prose, and so it's really a delight to be here with you. And a big thank you to Mylin Gotland for her inspiring and fascinating, beautiful ASL interpretation. I know it's a lot of work, and that just like any other interpretation, a lot of thought goes into how it's interpreted, and you can all see what an incredible job she does. And then also thank you to Sarah. What a great reading. Your poems are really moving, poignant. And I know that this reading is going to take a toll on you. And so thank you. It was a gift for you to come and read for us. And I know that you will you will need to rest later. And anyway, I'm grateful to you for doing that. And then finally, thank you to all of you for coming. It's so fun to see all of you here, and how great to join over Zoom for poetry during Poetry Month. Yay! So I'm just going to dive right in. And I never thought I'd write an Ars Poetica. This is my first and probably the last Ars Poetica. Writing is like walking the dog. Sometimes it's leashed to form, a trail to follow, or unleashed, roving, wild. We start as poet and transmogrify to animal, sniffing our way by impulse and urge. Writing is an archaeological dig, or a hunt through the archives of memory and moment. Writing is like falling asleep, surrendering to the delirium of dreams. Writing means sculpting with sound, part assonance, part consonance, and part dissonance, part providence, arrogance, innocence. Or forget the dog. Writing makes you a meerkat, screech owl, jellyfish, berserker. Poeming breaks the bones of what we know, resets them into a new scaffolding, a dizzying perch for perspective. A poem is a ribbon of song, a knock on the door, an invitation away from loneliness, a dance into humility and hunger, wave of slumber, paean for pain. There is no how for writing, no when or where or why. Writing is wax on, wax off, inspiration, aspiration, nicker and neigh, lull and frenzy, flight and fray. Writing mimics the journey of water, effluvial fingers seeping into an ocean, uplift of mist, downpour of sorrow, glisten of crystal, snowmelt of spring. Writing is an act of survival, a release valve, the need to express, lips pressed to mouthpiece or reed, a channel of sound shaped by embouchure. Yet each word is an edict of hope, whether vision or scree, aubade or nocturne, an incantation, lamentation, a cri de coeur, a plea. Winter dog walk. Wood smoke drifts down the chimney, a specter of weighted fog. And though its scent coats my I don't know why, but I got muted. And I'm not sure when, but I'm going to start that poem again. Winter dog walk. Wood smoke drifts down the chimney, a specter of weighted fog. And though its scent coats my fingers from futzing in the wood stove hours earlier, my mind knows the smell emanates from a fire my mother laid and father stoked in a cabin in Tahoma's shadow. Flames danced on cedar and heat, billowed to the loft where my siblings and I nestled under the flannel quilts till the crackle of bacon roused us into winter light. Today, the dog's leash lengthens and retracts like memory. Smoke skims along roof shingles, and my thoughts burrow deep in the frayed kip of a quilt. For Skipjack, who is my dog, who sleeps even now. We could never have been lovers, you with your penchant for meat, and me savoring the slow melt of chocolate, my life a poison to you, and yours a never-ending marathon of naps. You saw me as too unleashed, even though I was always tethered behind you. Remember how you whined when I wouldn't let you lick the water from my legs after I showered? My biggest complaint, besides your breath, was how you nosed your way into other people's business and had to smell everything. Still, we had fun racing down trails, didn't we? Your muscles rippled like a horse pulling a chariot, and I followed behind laughing as squirrels scampered up the trees. You and me, lovers? No. But still, we can't deny we've always been in love. Thoughts and prayers. On behalf of the people, for the people, we'd like to express our deepest condolences. For the victims and the families of the victims, we send our thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers to the victims and the families after such tragic loss. We'd like to express on behalf of our deepest, we send condolences in this moment of grief. In this moment, our thoughts and prayers are with you all, sending to the students for their heartbreaking losses, the victims and their families, our deepest expression. On behalf of the beautiful souls in this difficult, may they rest, time in peace. Those felled by another mass moment of silence, and in our grief, we wanted you to know we're pulling for you. Stay strong. May your memories comfort you. We'll light a candle. You'll always be in our hearts. We'll never forget the victims and their families. We'd like to express our deepest for your pain and prayers. May they rest in heartbreaking moments as we mourn these losses to unnecessary, so unnecessary violence. Only the good, our nation, die young, and we grieve with you. You'll never be forgotten, passed away on earth as it is in heaven. Give us our daily thoughts and prayers on behalf of victims and their loved ones, for the bereaved, the survivors expecting changes, legislation. It's too soon, too disrespectful. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. So take care, take cover, arm yourselves. We're rooting for you. We're sorry, so very sorry. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Gun, peace be with you and also with you forever and ever. Amen. "1,001 Things to Amend Before You Die." Excerpt 244 to 258, age 9. 244. Losing the quartz rock your oldest brother gave you to start your own collection. 245. Not admitting you didn't know what it meant and congratulating your brother when he told you he'd been laid off from Boeing. 246. Your rush of relief when you realized your parents hadn't called you downstairs to yell at you for jumping on the sofa. 247. Realizing that while you'd been shouting and jumping on the sofa, your parents were figuring out how to tell you your brother, their eldest son, had died from a seizure in his sleep. 248. not hugging your father as he trembled, swallowed back the impending landslide, then told you your brother was in God's hands now. 249. Letting your new best friend borrow your brother's portfolio of sketches. 250. Not tracking down your former new best friend when she moved away a few weeks later. 251. Scarfing handfuls of chocolate chips, Captain Crunch, and potato chips for dinner while both your parents lay bedridden with pneumonia the following winter. 252. Keeping, then not keeping your mother's secret when she told you decades later that your brother's death may have been a suicide, relief from the constant storm of seizures. 253. Believing somehow that your misplaced congratulations had contributed to his sense of isolation and that you were partially responsible for his death. 254. Deluding yourself into thinking his soul goes with you everywhere. 255. Knowing his absence has become a bigger presence in your life than your handful of thread-worn memories. 256. Being unable to distinguish between missing him and the pain conjured each time you think of missing him. 257. Pretending you see his face in every rock. 258. Your inability to see his face in every rock. I'm going to switch to a couple of poems about my son. When you first came home, little sack of potatoes, little Yukon gold, I carried you with one hand supporting your neck, the other wrapped under you like a sling, elbow to fingertip. You had a language of sighs and hiccups, blinks and eyes following mine. Hello, little kitten, little head of tufts and black spun sugar. I dressed you, my boy doll, in your Levi jacket, your matching denim cap. A game we played, bounce, bounce, bounce the baby, 1, 2, peekaboo. Did you know I lost twice before you? A game I didn't even know I was playing. But now Simon says, kiss the baby. Simon says, carry him gently. Simon says, support his wobbly head and never let him go. Slip silver. Splitting rivulets from cool magma, we poured the water silver like liquid metal mirrors, swimming in the palm, till we learned about absorption and the kidney's bitter end, how China's first emperor drank it mixed with powdered jade, his cheeks and fingers flaming as fast death replaced the glowing life his alchemists swore to extend. So when my toddler son bit through his glass thermometer, I dialed 911, then did my best to clear his mouth and airway of glass shards and the elusive cinnabar. And when the medics swarmed over Jeff, I kept out of their way. The dispatcher looped in poison control, ran some basic tests, while the sirens drew neighbors who whispered in the hall, look how frightened Jeff is while his mother does fuck all. Alchemy comes from the Sanskrit, the way of Mercury. My neighbors had wanted children. I just wanted Jeff to live. We weren't so different after all. An amalgam of base elements, with every way to wound, yet nothing to forgive. Okay, last one. I think it's kind of fun to see the form sometimes. This one's entitled Yes. Sunlight slants into the reception hall and glistens on bottle-shaped clusters of butterfly bush flowers as the open window breeze nudges the blooms. Like my sister-in-law's plumber of a brother who stands rigid at the edge of the dance floor, scowling at the bride's gayest friends who shimmy like street corner air dancers, inflatable tube men rippling from the ground up as my sister-in-law's brother resists the music rising from his feet through his legs and though his legs and torso surge like a windsock, his arms fused tightly against his sides, hands shoved deep in pockets as the hip DJ drops a heavy bass line, a thumpa shockwave, pretty much trampolining all of us to our feet, the whole wedding party bobbing our bliss to the beat. And yes, my sister-in-law's brother wobbles his shoulders like jello. And yes, he lifts and drops one heel now as the electrofusion throbs the crowd, a hypnotic tempo. And no, his hands are still in his pockets. But yes, he's watching the gay guys rumba, one behind the other, their hands holding the next boy's hips. And yes, the brother is smiling. He is smiling. And yes, it's a conga line. And yes, music snakes along the dance floor. And yes, his heel lands harder now. And yes, the aunties rave in the queue. And yes, we serpentine toward him. Oh, yes, the crowd, the music, the butterflies. Yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jill, for such an evocative reading, and thank you for your kind words. Both you and Sarah are also just angels of the poetry community, and you do so much for others, so I appreciate you as well. And now I would like to invite folks from the audience, if you would like to raise your hand, your little Zoom hand. You can raise your physical hand. It might be a little difficult to find you in the crowd, but I'll try. If you'd like to make comments or have some questions for our speakers today, please feel free to unmute yourselves, raise your hand, come through and congratulate, however you want to do it. We're being a little bit shy with our voice. So, well, I have wonderful comments going in the chat, which is great. I actually have a question for both of our poets today, if they don't mind a question. One of the things that's a hallmark of both of your writing is that you write about really important matters. You write matters such as illness and injustice. And I'm wondering if you find that crafting the poems of such important and powerful matters is a different process for you than perhaps crafting poems of praise and celebration.
I do believe that every poem I write, as I wrote in that first poem, Ars Poetica, is an edict of hope, at least for me. It is. It might not be for readers, but it is for me. I have this idea that we wouldn't bother to write about the difficult things if we didn't have some sense of hope that things can be better. And I think it's important to give voice to that full range. Interestingly, right now, I've just been on a kick of writing these really kind of, I call them ecstatic poems, and they feel like the opposite of the ones that are, you know, kind of raging against injustice. And with this collection, I sort of intentionally put the heavier poems up front and moved toward ones that, you know, kind of moving toward, you know, from injustice to grief and loss to a self-accounting for my own actions, and ultimately to appreciation and love. And because it really reflected my own experience over the last, oh gosh, what is it, 2024? Well, really since late 2016, some of you may know why. And so that series of events in our lives, from an election that was disappointing for many of us, to the pandemic, to many other things that are happening in the world, and I found that I had to reach some point of going day to day and not being absolutely miserable, and so maybe that's where that balance comes in, or it does, you know, that we intentionally go there. I don't know, Sarah, I think that you probably have not only written about this, but taught about it because of the nature of your courses at the University of San Francisco.
Yeah, it's a wonderful question, Lana. And I agree with a lot of what you said, Jill. I find that poems of praise, they're harder for me to write poems that sound sincere. Praise feels, the experience of praise and gratitude is, I don't usually experience it with language. It's more of a visceral embodiment. It's almost easier for me to go dark or to go into wrestling with language. And with praise and gratitude, there's not much to say except thank you. So I do find with the fact that I don't have a lot of energy to spare, I write pretty slowly. I find that I need to get into the heart of it quickly. As an editor, I've read a lot of poems, and I've experienced this myself. I've read a lot of poems where the poem feels like kind of like that first part of a conversation you're having with someone, where there's something you really want to say, but you spend the first, or like in therapy, you spend the first 50 minutes kind of talking around it. You describe your day, you talk about events, you talk about memories, and then there becomes a moment where you've cleared that out of the way with your friend or with your therapist or your priest or whatever, that's cleared out of the way, and then you say what you really need to say, what's really coming up in your throat that you need to say. And those poems that come in that moment, those are the ones that matter. And because those are the ones I recognize even as an editor. Wow, someone just cut right through it and got to where they need to be to say what is truly coming up from their soul. And so the process for me has been, because I really can't take hours and hours to get to what I need to say, has been to learn how to just do the deep dive. And not every poem in this book is a deep dive. I've got a poem about a Batman character riding an escalator. I've got poems about hanging out with someone who's a healer, and I'm kind of teasing them. It's not like every poem has to be super deep or super heavy. It's just that that's just where I have needed to go, at least with this collection. Interestingly, like Jill, once this book was done and I felt like I had the heavy conversation, that I needed to have with the world and with myself and with God. I've been more interested lately in writing love poems that are just, I guess, celebratory or, sensual, or just wanting to, now that I feel like I've let go of some resentment and some grief, I find myself wanting to write poems that can remind me and perhaps remind the reader of what is keeping us going. So that's a very long-winded answer to your question, Lana.
Yeah, both of your answers are so wonderful. Yeah, I really appreciate that. That I think Jill said the necessity for both kinds of poems that are really important. And, having one's own need to sort of get to the grief first because, of energy and time and the nature of moving it through our bodies and our lives. And I just thought both answers are so powerful and so interesting. And I think they both speak to the importance of writing whatever your truth is at the moment, and just being where you need to be in that moment of writing. And I think that's so important. And the work that we've heard here today is so powerful and wonderful. And there's humor in both of your work, and just really so much poignancy. So thank you for sharing that with us today. And if there are no other questions or comments, last chance, going once, going. Okay. I will ask.
I think Jen
Okay,
Z has a question. Jen.
okay, I don't see the hand. Okay.
Jen.
See, please unmute and ask your question.
Unmute, Jen.
Please unmute and ask your question.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. I don't have your book in front of me, Sarah, and I don't remember the exact poem, but it seems that there were more than one poem that were fairly structured, definitive rhyme and meter. And Jill, you showed us the last poem you read that obviously had some kind of a structure visually. And so I'm wondering, for each of you, does structure come first, or do ideas fit into a structure, and is it helpful to have a fairly defined structure? Does that make sense?
Sure. I used a lot of forms in this book. I have a sonnet and a pantoum, and I have a shape poem, and they can be a nice container for when the thoughts are not coalescing. A form can help you concentrate the wideness of everything that's trying to come through you into a shape. So it gives you an opportunity to just focus on the language and let the form and it's nice. There's a nice interaction often between the form and the theme, or what's trying to come through. They can shape each other. Some things, like the elephant poem, there's no form for why I was thinking about elephants walking. That just had to be. And I think if I tried to force it into a form, it would have lost whatever weird magic was trying to come through there. So yeah, it's kind of a poem by poem thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Jill, I think was one of your poems a pantoum? It's the Thoughts and Prayers. That seemed to have a form that
that one is not. It's a one stanza, and yeah, it's not, but it does use a lot of repetition, so I can see why it would sound like that if you couldn't see it on the page.
Right.
I wanted to kind of disrupt the cliches and the things, you know, that, and mix them in ways that kind of proved how meaningless they can be. And yeah, but I would agree that it really depends on the poem for me as well. And sometimes the poem kind of finds its own form. And other times I set out wanting to do a certain form. I have a love-hate relationship with sestinas. I think they're a very, very difficult poem to write. And so I love them because I love the challenge of it. And I do have a sestina in here. And as if it weren't difficult enough, I made it into an acrostic. And so along the left-hand margin, it spells fall of man over and over. And so that one I went into very intentionally, and I knew I wanted to like really blast you know, some of the patriarchy in this world. And so that, you know, historically and in the present day. And so I went from, you know, origin stories like Adam and Eve forward, but and kind of calling out the fallacy of those arguments too. Like, anyway, so I felt as though it needed, that was such a big idea, and I have so much anger that I knew it was going to be a rant. And so I thought, well, if I contain it in this very controlled form, it will maybe prove that I'm not totally ranting, that this was thought through very, very carefully. Because as a female poet, you know, and maybe all poets get this, and it's just, to me, tiresome when people sort of dismiss a poet's work because they think they're just ranting, they're just angry, not worth listening to. And but I think, you know, and I find it interesting that people don't say that about Howell. Maybe they did initially, but I think they were so taken by the, you know, quote, obscenity of it, that that they didn't do that. And so I'm sensitive to that. But yeah, I think form, I play around with form a lot, but I also love free verse and I love blank verse. And so, and I would imagine that just about everybody on here, I think everyone here is a poet, and maybe you all would say the same, that you love to play with form, even if you write strictly in free verse, you're writing in form.
Thank you for that wonderful question, Jen, and thank you for those wonderful answers. I think Holly had her hand up earlier. Holly Hughes?
Thank you, Lana. I did, and then I noticed the time and I put it down, but so it's up to you whether you want to take
Oh,
this.
absolutely.
Okay, okay. And ironically, the question is about time, which I think we all are feeling the time pressures. And I know Jill especially, and Sarah too, that both of you are also working as editors of in Jill's case, Wandering Angus Press, and in Sarah's case as well. And I, as one of the publishers of Empty Bowl, I find it's getting harder and harder to carve out time for my own writing when there's so many other kind of demands on my time. And I just wondered if you could speak to that a little bit, about if you have strategies for being able to return to your own time. I know it's
tough.
not an easy question.
Yeah, it's tough. I think that it's easy for any of us to prioritize others. And I think maybe, you know, not to generalize too much, but poets are lovely people generally. And so I think there is that tendency to prioritize others. And there's a negotiation with the people in our lives, you know, and I'm lucky that the people in my life understand and allow me that. And so that's really great. But my schedule, as my husband and I own a B&B, and for about 6 months out of the year, we don't have time to blink, you know. It's just it's a wild ride for about 6 months each year. But then in the rest of the year, I can somewhat make up for that, and I can do little retreats, even if they're at home. And so that's a way of finding balance. But I think more than any of that, it's just really, you know, being willing to say, this is a priority. See, it's even hard for me to say this in front of you all because it sounds so vain, but by golly, I matter and I'm worth it. And that time I can claim for myself. I deserve that. And I don't know why. Why is that a hard thing to say, to claim? But until I could say that, everything else came first. And so there's, who knows, there's some psychological, probably should have gotten therapy years ago to get to that point. God only knows. But yeah, anyway, I'll stop now. Thanks for that question, Holly.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Jill.
Well, I may not be the best person to ask because I actually had to put Rivermouth Review on sabbatical this spring, because not only myself, but my lovely, lovely volunteer staff, we all kind of needed a break. We read, I don't know, 800-900 poems for each issue, and the sheer volume of that and wanting to do them justice is a lot. And I also knew this book was going to be coming out, and I thought, an issue of Rivermouth, do what I need to do to promote my book. It's like this, it's hard. And it's easier for me to celebrate other poets, and it's easier for me to put on my editor hat and work with other poets. And it's so exciting when you find a poet that you want to lift up and showcase. And so it's a push-pull. It's definitely a push-pull. And I would say the hardest part of the job, honestly, is the promotion, the constant needing to stay engaged online, because it's an online journal, and that's how I have found so many wonderful poets from around the world, and wanting to share the work. It's really, as everyone knows now, social media is where everyone apparently needs to go to stay afloat and stay relevant, and that part's pretty hard. So I don't have an answer for you, Holly, except that I feel you, and it's a constant negotiation. Am I going to write a poem today, or am I going to read a couple hundred poems? It's a negotiation, and separating out the work that's coming in from the work I want to write is been a good practice in compartmentalizing. So
Yeah.
Sarah, I just want to congratulate you on making that decision, because the journal can wait, other issues can come later, but your debut full length only happens once.
yes, I've been telling myself that
Good for you.
over and over again. So yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Nice.
Thank you for that validation.
Thank you for that question, Holly. It's a wonderful question. I think for me, being a publisher and a poet, I receive so much beautiful work that I think, I often think, can my voice matter in all of this? There are so many amazing poets writing, and that part is hard to balance. Sometimes I think I can't live up to the poets I publish. And as you've seen here today, it's tough. It's a tough act to follow these amazing poets. Thank you for those questions and your comments. And I would like to close out this reading by asking each of our poets to just give us one more poem, if they would. And Sarah, would you like to give us a poem?
Sure, I'd love that. I'm going to read the title poem from the collection, and it is a shape poem. It's probably pretty hard to see that, but I wrote it to mimic the experience of what's happening in the poem, which is the scarecrow getting down from her pole and walking. So the lines go like this. The scarecrow of my former self. The scarecrow of my former self dislodges from her pole and walks on stilts, crossing untouched over roadside ditches filled with mud, blood, and broken glass. She's a straw dancer with raven claws, rustling cloak and apple blossom grace. She stalks the fields of my memories, scattering swarms of regret. Poised on the horizon, barnwood limbs outstretched, beckoning. Why is she wearing that ridiculous hat? I must go and see. The crows fly to greet us as we waltz against the thunderous sky.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And Jill, would you please read another poem?
I'd be honored. And what a beautiful title poem, Sarah. Bedded in wet rock like any other roe. I should mention this is a persona poem in the voice of Salmon. Bedded in wet rock like any other roe, I woke in a float at river's rim. Sweet slurry of ancestors, my pillow and pledge. I dreamed down current, a hatchling of spring's surprise. Fry to smolt, I weltered in fluvial estuaries and brackish tides. When vast waters welcomed me, our sweep of Chinook synchronized. Outline of orcas, shape of shark, such mercury molting. We skirted the surf in a crossweave of silver, bolted lightning back at the sky. Rest wriggled in a forest of eelgrass, porphyra camouflaged our flash. We swam hard against the waves, building muscle, storing steam, till the ancestors called us from a spill of snow-fed waters. Clear slipstream of memory, river me home, river me home. And I just want to give a shout out to Empty Bowl Press because they published that in the I Sing the Salmon Home anthology edited by Rena Priest. And it's just a gorgeous anthology.
Thank you. Again, thank you so much to Jill McCabe Johnson and Sarah Stockton for this wonderful reading. And big thanks to Mylene Gotland for her interpreting. And thanks to all of you in our audience today here. I always say a poem is never truly complete until it has a listener or a reader, and now an ASL interpreter. So thank you for being here and being with us this afternoon. I hope you'll support our poets by getting copies of their books, either from the poets themselves, from your favorite brick and mortar or online bookshops. I hope we'll see you at future MoonPath Press readings. And until then, I wish you peace and poetry. Bye for now.